Hey friends, thanks for clicking on this video and joining in on a continuing conversation. The topic of this conversation is maybe not so much better qualifying your content, or more from my perspective as to why I like to better qualify my content. Okay? I watched a video this morning on the YouTube channel Nature Lost Vault. Okay, and the title of the video is The American Wood That Outlasts Concrete. Why did Nixon's administration ... Okay, now I'm going to put this into the context. Sometime back, my friend Broken Feather, William, asked me if I'd ever made any gunpowder using Osage orange. I had not, but I had a bunch of Osage orange left behind, and I decided to make some gunpowder out of it. When I was putting into context everything that I knew about Osage orange, I made the statement that Osage orange is the hardest hardwood in this continent. And of course, as usual, you get people leaving comments saying, no, it's not. That I had to do another video qualifying once again the difference between Osage orange as a hardwood as opposed to ironwood. See, and some people like to go to, Facebook groups, forums, whatever, and try to research a rebuttal to what somebody like myself may state and try to disprove it one way or another. Well, a lot of times content creators just simply don't know the full context of everything, or maybe they might forget to put it in their video as part of the context. So what I'm going to do, because I watched this video twice this morning just so that I made sure that I was hearing what the content creator was saying. He said Osage orange is the hardest hardwood in this continent, and you drop it in water and it will not float. In fact, I think he made that statement twice. That is not correct. Now, I'm not saying that this content creator is purposely misleading everybody. All I'm stating is that he didn't qualify it. He should have qualified it better. Because, one thing that I do when I go to make black powder, I go out of my way to show you the specific gravity even after the wood is charcoaled, so that you can look through the glasses and see that not all woods, even though they're charred, still possess a specific gravity that's indicative of the wood itself. Now, Osage orange has a specific gravity of 0.82, 0.83, but a lot of that depends on how much you dry the wood down. Now, I will qualify that with this. If you have a good piece of Osage orange and you're trying to build a good usable bow with it, a 12% moisture content is going to make the bow sluggish, and as the wood continues to dry out, whatever set that you have in the limbs, it's going to maintain that unless you go out of your way to correct that with a heat source once the wood gets down to a 9% specific gravity. Okay? But that's neither here nor there. When the gentleman in his video makes the statement, it will not float, that's dependent upon how much moisture is in the wood. Now, I have a pan of water right here. This piece of Osage orange I've had for a very long time. It's been in my shop, out of the weather, but there is an ambient moisture associated with this because I don't keep it locked away. I just leave it on a shelf out of the direct rain and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn the camera around. I got a pan of water. I'm going to take this block of Osage orange and I'm going to drop it into the water so that it sinks, and then watch it come back up, because the moisture content is very low in this piece of Osage orange. Okay, so let me get set up and I'll demonstrate that. So there's the pan of water, and as you can see, this piece of Osage orange just fits on the inside of the pan. And as stated, I'm going to drop it from a height so that when it hits the water, it'll go below, and then we'll see it float back to the top. So to make a blanket statement that Osage orange is so dense that it will not float is not true. Now, I will also make the statement that you can see that it's very heavy as far as the water in this pan is concerned, and given maybe an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours for this piece of wood to draw in some moisture, it will sink. But to make a blanket statement without qualifying it better, it depends on the moisture content as to whether this will sink or float is a much more better way to present your argument. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little demonstration to prove that Osage orange does float. But there again, it depends on what the moisture content is. And as mentioned, you could just imagine within a short amount of time, once that wood starts absorbing some of that moisture, it's going to sink. So it really does depend on what the moisture content of what the wood is to make an absolute statement, and that was not put into the context. But I really would encourage you, friends, to go over and watch that video. The YouTube channel, once again, is Nature Lost Vault, and the title of the video is The American Wood That Outlasts Concrete. And there's more to the title, but you'll recognize the thumbnail because it has to do with something that took place during the Nixon administration as to why this country was going out of its way to get rid of all of the Osage orange. Unsuccessfully, mind you, but, you know, damage was done. So it's a very informative video with that one exception about Osage orange won't float. Yes, it does. It just depends on the moisture content. Okay. Now, I also want to put something into this discussion that I got to ask myself, why do people relate or surrender so readily to so-called experts? Okay. And I have two examples that I want to relate to in this discussion, and I know of this personally on 2 occasions. Okay, and it is in one aspect related to Osage orange. I was at the Santa Fe Trail Rendezvous several years back, and they had a costume contest, and a friend of mine, Charlie, and his girlfriend dressed up as Blackfoot Indians, and they really went out of their way to make their costumes look super fantastic, and they were. But as the costume contest continued, they ended up taking second place. And it just so happened to be that I was heading out to my vehicle at that time that my friend Charlie and his girlfriend were discussing with this so-called historian expert. I heard her say, well, the reason why I had to make you take second place is because there were no Blackfeet in the Southwest. And I just kind of had to chuckle. And the reason being is that having already, and I know Charlie knew this himself because he was a bow builder and his favorite wood was Osage orange, and he subscribed to Primitive Archer magazines also. So I knew that he knew this. In fact, we kind of had a little bit of a discussion after the fact. But the point being is that there is historical records, and if you watch this video that I'm recommending, you will see that there was a massive trade between Texas and Montana for that Osage orange. So there's already a trade route set up for that involved Blackfoot Indians, because they're in the Montana area, in Texas. Okay? But there's also historical references, and I've read this from the Primitive Archer magazine, of Blackfeet Indian being located in Texas, and they were coming down to get the Osage orange themselves. So they were a fierce people, according to some, but not all of them were. Some of them did live in peace with other tribes and white men. Okay? But, you know, Hollywood likes to portray just the opposite. But that's a discussion for another time. The other incident that I had with this same historian professor teaching at a college, I was at Cache La Plew some time back. She was camped there, and I was showing a friend of mine a bird's eye Damascus knife that I have. I pulled it out of the sheath as she was walking by to show my friend, and she looks down and says, "Wow, that's a real pretty knife. Too bad it's not period correct." So I said, "Excuse me? How do you know I just didn't come off of a ship from Turkey?" The Turkish had been folding steel for centuries. I said, "The Japanese sword is nothing but a folded steel. It's a weaker metal folded, or a stronger metal folded over a weaker metal for the core." I says, "Man has learned to fold steel for centuries. It's a difficult thing to do, and not every blacksmith had the skill to do it, but the skills were there, and they were very well kept secret." So she goes, "Well, the mountain men wouldn't have had it." You see, when you back someone into a corner with their rhetoric, this is what they do. See, too bad it's not period correct. Well, it is period correct depending on where you live and or where you came from. Well, the mountain men wouldn't have had it. You don't know that. You weren't there. You don't know what the mountain men had or had not. All we have is some historical artifacts left behind, but a few historical artifacts does not create the entire context. It just doesn't. I'll give you a really good example of this. Okay? If you've never heard of the Viking Ulfbert sword, I would recommend that you do a little bit of research on that, because the Vikings, not all of them, but a lot of the Vikings had an Ulfbert sword. What made this sword so special and so unique for the time is it was literally made out of spring steel. Now let that sink in, because somebody right now is thinking, well, you got to have an awfully hot oven and a controlled heat source to be able to make spring steel. And you would be correct. But there's a video on YouTube of a blacksmith in Door County, Wisconsin, that duplicates precisely and perfectly how blacksmiths back in the day made ovens hot enough to be able to make spring steel in a crucible. I don't know the title of it right now, but if you just type in Ulfbert sword and do some read some titles, you'll probably come upon it. But that's an art that was, or I should say knowledge, that was closely guarded by blacksmiths. I mean, why give that knowledge to a competitor? If you were the only one that could properly make spring steel back in the Vikings' day, then you would become a very wealthy man. Okay? So when experts come around and say, that's not period correct, well, they didn't have the means to make an oven to get hot enough to make spring steel, that's an expert that doesn't know everything. They're only repeating what they've learned in college classes themselves. Okay? That's just the simplicity of it. So anyhow, I hope that you will avail yourself to what I'm discussing here. And I hope that you will certainly take the time to go and watch Nature's Lost Vault, the American wood that outlasts concrete, and learn, even on one small level, how our government goes out of its way to make life more complicated for us. Not so much when they enact a policy, but 50, 60 years down the road. And now we're all finding ourselves that what they enacted back here wasn't as brilliant as they thought it was, because it never is. So anyhow, I hope you guys will give it a thumbs up and share it with your bestest of friends, and we'll catch you in the next video. Bye.